Hey guys, it's Nick here, and today I just want to cover a few basic methods of writing drums in Ableton Live. I'm going to be using Ableton Live 10, and I'm going to cover two basic methods of how to write your drums. The first one I'll be looking at is drum rack. Drum rack is a very convenient way of writing your drums into MIDI, and it has certain advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages of drum rack is that you have a huge number of potential sounds you can input. These are all the cells that you can be using. I'm gonna use about 4 for this one. In the interest of time, I've already written some drums, just to illustrate how everything is done. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a few more and fill out this drum loop a little bit. But as I said before, so I have a MIDI clip here running, and we're gonna make a 128 BPM house beat basically, and just to play what I've made you, just a really basic little house beat, and you can see exactly these are the MIDI clips or MIDI notes designating the respective samples that they're triggering. If you want to actually play these and hear them play out loud through your channel, you need to enable this blue monitoring button here. And then you can actually try them out. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add another element to this loop that I have going. And we're going to use what are called one-shots, which are basically just clips of individual notes of whatever instrument you wanna sample. So for drums it would be just one drum hit, and for, I don't know, piano it would just be one piano note. So for this beat, I'm thinking we can add some kind of a percussion one shot. So we can go into our perks folder, and you audition your samples in the browser here. If you find the cue volume is a bit too loud, you can reduce the volume with this knob over here. So let's just, for the sake of the demonstration, let's take our sample, throw it into one of the cells here. Disable the snap. All snap does is that it just basically takes the end of your sample and it tries to cut it off at a point where the amplitude of the wave will be 0. In other words, basically if you enable snap, any long sine kind of wave will be cut off at a point where it won't click at the end. So we don't need that right now, because all that's doing is take away some part of our sample. We're not using any kind of sine heavy sounds here. It's just a little percussion instrument. Just for the sake of yeah, so all we need to do now is, drum rack has its own mixer, its own built-in MIDI mixer basically, or audio mixer, but for these MIDI tracks. So we want to reduce the volume of this, and you can apply audio effects to these MIDI tracks individually. And the way you do that is you go into your audio effects. Let's say I want to use an auto pan. You just drag that over to your track here. If you increase the amount, so the rate's a bit too high, we can just sync it up to 1 bar. Cool. So that's how you write any kind of drum line in drum rack, is by basically opening up your MIDI. You can also adjust velocity. So for example, for this hi-hat, what I've done is I've reduced the velocities of the first and third notes when they make contact with the kick drum and the kick plus clap combo. And that's what basically allows your hi-hats to feel a little bit more human and more natural. The same kind of thing I did with the claps here. If you listen, I have 2 clap layers. You press command, you hold command and solo 2 tracks, by the way, to get 2 tracks soloed. You'll notice one of the claps is trailing behind the other one slightly. And that's also to make it feel more natural. If you bring it back to where it was originally, it sounds okay, but it's not it doesn't have this kind of swing that I want to give it. If you bring it back a little bit, that's a bit much. It's a bit better. Finally, this is supposed to be a kind of a top high-end layer clap. So I added a reverb, but also what I did, you can go into your filter section. Each of these drum samples has a filter section, which is a very nifty part about Simpler. And in Simpler, if you want to say, for example, I want to high pass these hi-hats. So I'm going to enable my filter, select my high pass filter, and bring it up to maybe 1000 hertz. 12 decibel filter is fine. Just to cut out that low end thud. And now if you play it, cool. Finally, this drum rack, this channel that kind of sums up all of these individual samplers, these MIDI simpler instances, because these are all instances of what's called simpler in Ableton. It's an audio instrument. It's basically a simple sampler. And but this drum rack channel can also have effects be added onto it, and what that means is that all of these individual samples get summed up into this what's called a bus. And onto this drum bus, you can actually add effects that'll then be applied to all of your drums. So let's say I want to add some filter effect that I can use in a breakdown or something similar, and I want to basically high pass all of my drums. So I'm using an auto filter and just put the high pass mode on. So all of my drums are affected by this. I mean, you can imagine starting your house song with just the drums playing, but having the bass cut out to come in at the second portion of your kind of intro. Like so. And then you can automate this to then start with the bass. That's one, device you can use in your compositions to kind of build tension and so on. But instead of obviously applying auto filters to each and every element and then automating all of them to do this, I just put it onto the drum rack channel, which sums up all of these individual samples. So that's how you use drum rack to write drums. It has its own advantages. Obviously, the fact that these parameters are so easy to use, and you can hot swap. I'm not sure if I showed you hot swapping, but I can. If you're not satisfied with a particular sound, let's say with our percussion sound that we added, you can click this little orange button and on the fly replace them. Let's say for the sake of argument. Now just to illustrate what hot swapping is. So all of this is very easy, and it can be done on the fly, and really there's nothing really lacking here, other than one, to some people, crucial thing, which is the ability to actually see your waveforms. So for instance, when I was shifting over this clap, I don't actually know whether I'm shifting it over correctly, because this clap has a beginning portion, which is like the prelude to the actual clap. And if you listen to it, you'll know what I mean. And if you could visualize this waveform here. So this is where the actual clap starts, and this is the little bit before it of the tiny imperfectly placed claps just before this main transient. And this is designed so that it's literally designed to be shifted over a little bit so that this transient lines up with your kick, and it gives you this more natural feel that I was talking about earlier. However, I had no idea whether I was lining up my kick correctly because I can't see the waveforms. Likewise, not being able to see the waveforms makes it difficult to layer your drums in a way that accounts for phasing problems. And this is kind of the same thing. This is basically a phase issue. I was trying to select the right phase at which to play these two samples together. When you're layering a bunch of, like, say you're making some very technical drum and bass, and you want to layer some snare drums, you need to see those waveforms. Otherwise, you're going to layer snare drums and they're going to be out of phase with one another, and you're not going to be able to visualize them to fix them. So another very viable way of writing your drums is by using your session view. And I already have a little thing written here, and for the sake of variety, I wrote a little hip-hop beat. I'll raise my tempo to 150, that's what I wrote it at. So here you notice something completely different, right? So all of the waveforms are easy to see, and the way I did this was I essentially went into my folders and just dragged my samples in. So let me just play you what I've made so far. This is just the drums. And you need to click this, by the way, to allow your session view arrangement to be played, because otherwise I would have just played my my live view drums that I made here. And enable that. So just a basic trap beat. And the basic components are just a kind of a top kick, hi-hats, snare, and a little ride. What's also an important thing that I'm going to do here, and then I'm going to jump back to my the house beat just to illustrate it in that context as well. But what you can do is you can go into loops and stuff, and you can drag those loops into your arrangement. And what they can do is they can add some kind of feeling of they can fill out your production a little bit. That's quite important when you have a lot of kind of broken samples in an arrangement. Even though they're rhythmically correct, you want something to fill it out a bit. So the way I would do that is bring in a loop. So something like this. So that's already at 150 BPM, so I didn't need to warp that, but so that's one example of supplementing your drum beat with a loop. So again, the process here, it's not that much different from the drum rack process. It's just a bit more tedious. We're gonna have to create an audio track, a real audio track with Command T on Mac or Control T on PC, and then go into whatever you want to throw into your drum part. Let's say I want to use some percussion. Actually, I know exactly what to throw in. We can use one of these chants.
Hey, fine. Hot. Hey, woo, fuck. Let go. Hey, yeah. Yeah. Go. Black. Oh, hey. Okay. Ha. Yeah. Ha. Yeah.
So let's try this. And then you just throw it into your audio track like so. And then you have full control of the actual volume. So one other advantage is the fact that you have, these are real audio tracks. They're bona fide audio tracks that get summed into your master channel. And so say you want to render something out to your friend for a collaboration, where you want to send your stuff to a mixing engineer, you can just do this, and then all of these, if you click render all tracks in your render screen, you're going to get all of these individual tracks, and then they can be mixed by a mixing engineer. Whereas in Drum Rack, that's kind of possible, but you need to actually create all of these tracks anyways, and then route individual MIDIs, route individual simpler instances to audio tracks. So that's a big waste of time, and you can't just select your Drum Rack MIDI clip. Like, you can't just select this and expect all of these drums to be rendered out individually. You're still going to get one big audio file consisting of all of these drums together, whereas you don't have that problem when you're doing this with these in session view with actual live samples. And the basic process is the same. You just copy paste. So one disadvantage is obviously, like, say I don't like how they sound and I want to transpose it down. One way you can do it is to save time, which isn't always possible, but to save time you can highlight all of them, and let's say I want to transpose them, so you can actually transpose all of them together. But so here in this context, we actually need to highlight all of them, or if I made a change to a single one, say I want to change the velocity of this one, drop the velocity or the volume of this one, I can do that by reducing the volume of this sample in the sample field, or the sample window here, after clicking it twice, right? You can do that a bit more. And you can watch it happen in the waveform as well. You know what? We're gonna make it like a ghost note. I don't want to select. There's no way I can select all of my samples and then apply this change. I need to, unfortunately, unless there might be a faster way that I don't know of, but I need to actually select these this half a bar. Oh, it's a full bar actually. I have to select this bar and duplicate it so that all of these second chants get that change. Whereas this kind of stuff in MIDI isn't so much a problem, because first of all, in MIDI, any parameter that you change applies to every single MIDI note that's written in the arrangement. But if you ever do need to do something like this, you still need to do a similar process in MIDI. Even when you, for example, you change the velocity of one note, you do need to copy paste that over. But ultimately, it's a lot easier. For example, in MIDI, let's say for the sake of argument, I want to take this, I want to bring it over, copy paste it. You have this ability, if you want to extend it, this extends further out, but still any change I make to this first bar, provided that you see these little lines, right? They're not actually separated. They're still together, but they're separated by little notches here, indicating that it's all one repeating MIDI clip. Any change I make in this clip will be applied throughout the entire duration of what I extended. So for instance, it'll sound a bit silly now because it's at a very high BPM. Let's say I want to cut out the first kick of this bar. Watch what happens in the MIDI clip. They disappear for the entire duration. That sounds a bit silly. But that's one advantage. You can't do that with audio tracks, right? So yeah, so this is how, let me just quickly finish the processing here. I kind of want to add an auto filter here, reduce the frequency. Same process of addition of effects and stuff. And now, so you see how drum rack has a nice little neat little channel here with 4 sub channels. You can do the same thing with audio tracks by simply making groups. So I made a group by selecting all of these tracks. Let me ungroup them just to show how they look. Oh, sorry. Oh, to ungroup something, you need to right-click the group and then ungroup it. But to group it again, you want to select your tracks. Chant will now be a part of it, and we'll group them together. And we can rename this group drums. And then we can collapse this group. And with Live 10, you can also bring groups of groups. And that might sound redundant, but it's actually quite an interesting feature. So previous to this, we have this percussion element. Let's actually put that in here. So previous to this, I actually wrote an 808 bass line here. And this group will function the exact same way as the drum rack, in the sense that if I apply any effects onto this group, this drums group that I made, those effects will be transferred across all of the tracks. So without wasting CPU power, I can just add one reverb to this drum bus and not have to worry about CPU resources being lost by adding it to all of the channels. So I'll do that just to illustrate the point. If I do this and I add a reverb just to this drum track, right? You can make a cool effect like. So that ride symbol doesn't seem to want to play with my group, and that's because I left it out of the group by accident. So to bring it into the group, I need to shift it over, and now you see it's part of the group. So one sec, let me see here what I'm doing here. I need to go back to this drum track. I was adjusting the reverb on the ride track. Yeah, so notice how I left the 808 out deliberately, because 808, it's a very kind of low-end heavy element, and if you include it in the processing for your other drums, they might just get drowned out simply because any compression or whatever that you add will get skewed horribly by the 808 drum. So always watch out for that. So there we use the loop to supplement our thing, to supplement our trap beat. I'll just show you quickly how you can do this in session or in live view with your house drums. Whoa. And you need to play this now. We click this MIDI clip. This is our MIDI clip that's functional at the moment. And let's say we want to also supplement this. In live view, all you need to do, instead of dragging in the loop that we did for the drums here, isn't it nice, by the way, that you can just put this all together and it's not a huge mess with the groups and stuff in Live 10. It's pretty cool. But so here, what we're going to do is we're going to just rename this, I guess, loop. Go into your sample folder, find a drum loop that you want to use to fill out your drum production. We'll be using these infinity loops. I like that one. We can throw it in. We're at 128. We don't need to warp it. But unfortunately, to actually get this thing to loop in your audio clip here, your live audio clip, you gotta warp. You gotta click warp. It's not actually gonna do anything to your track because we're at the same BPM. And also, I didn't specify anything. I didn't go in and create a warp mark and do this kind of stuff. That's the only time that you're actually gonna get a change in the timing, unless you have automatic warping set in your live preferences for long clips. But this isn't a long clip, so I don't think it would even do that. But anyway, so what this would sound like in the context of a house beat. Oh, yeah, forgot to enable the loop feature here. And you can mute things in the drum rack by opening up the drum rack and just clicking this button. Likewise, this could be subjected to all kinds of effects, auto filters, and so on. You know, for fun, what we can try adding a little redux. Put it on soft, and this is a big crusher basically. That's a good dead mouse style effect. Hard would give you a much more severe effect. Cool. Yeah, so that's basically how you fill out this this little drum loop. And one last thing I'm gonna do probably is I'm just gonna sidechain this little percussion that I made, or this loop rather that I dropped in. Let me see if I can enable. Oh, perfect. We do have, so if you click this button over here, you get to see these envelopes, which I want to draw into my little audio clip that I have here, the percussion. My goal here is to have this sample rate go from low to high to low again. So it gives some dynamism to our drum rack. To our drum track. That's what you want. You want your drum track to sound interesting to the ear, so it doesn't sound boring after a while. And the way it's going to sound is like this. Very nice. And since this is saved to the clip, you don't have to worry about copy pasting it like you would in an arrangement view or whatever in an automation. But here this is just an envelope that's saved to the clip, and it's attached to that Redux parameter. If you watch it in real time, it will be doing this. And in the context, again, I want to add a little auto filter. There's a bit too much low end in here. So in context. Cool. Alright, so I hope you come away from this tutorial with some knowledge of these basic methods of writing your drums. Hopefully you'll find some practical use for these techniques, and you can bring them into your workflow somehow, and ultimately make your drums in your own production sound a lot better and more interesting with the techniques that I've just showed you. Thank you very much, and have a good day.